Welcome to the Dr. Paul Show. I'm Dr. Paul. To have the pleasure of introducing a patient I've actually just recently seen for the first time, Melissa. And so, but I wanted to bring her in because she has just a really incredible story that I want her to share with us. So if you could, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. So as we discussed the last time I was here, my childhood trauma started very young. I was born with a portion of my intestine that wasn't developed. So my first surgery was at 3 months old. And obviously I don't remember that. But I've had complications throughout my childhood as it relates to that. That is just something I've had to deal with my whole life. So I know nothing other. But the real challenge was when I was about 7 years old is when my parents introduced me to alcohol.
When you were 7?
7.
Wow.
Yeah, we would watch the New Year's Day parade and they would make this drink called Ramos Fizz. I don't even know what's in it. But anyways, so they would give it to us and we'd all watch the parade together, and I remember liking how I felt. And I wanted another one. And another one, but obviously they did at least monitor it a little bit. Mm-hmm. So both of my parents were very heavy drinkers. My mom was an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic too, but later down the line he ended up stopping. But it was a very challenging childhood because my mom was so into her disease. Oftentimes there was not a whole lot of interaction with her. And it was very difficult because my father was a executive for Philips Ultrasound and he traveled throughout the country and then of course overseas. So he was gone quite a bit. And I just remember it was just yelling, a lot of yelling, yelling and more yelling for really no reason. But at the time I didn't realize that. I had my dog Chief. I used to curl up on the floor on his blanket with him, and that was like my safe spot. And so my parents started having problems with their marriage, and he would not come home. There was an instance where she was cooking dinner, and she took the entire casserole out of the oven and just slammed it on the floor, and the food went everywhere. Glass went everywhere. You know, it was a Pyrex. And I was the only one home, and she took off, and she had been drinking. And she skirted right on out of the driveway and took off. So I was left like just terrified and having to clean what was on the floor. And it was because my dad didn't come home. And
Is that why she threw her down? Because she was frustrated he wasn't coming home? Wow.
that was just one little instance. But that's something that definitely sticks out in my mind.
Yeah.
And then it just got uglier. My grandma would visit, and at one instance, my mom started beating my grandma up, like punching her in the face. And I'm like, oh my
her mom?
Lord, yes. And her glasses are all terrible. These are just some memories that I have. So, I mean, she wasn't all bad, but I remember the bad.
Right.
So, anyways, then when I turned about 12 is when my father left. He left and left. He didn't come back. So they divorced, and that put my mom in just to a tailspin. So he took off. I don't know where he went, but I didn't see him for a long time. And my mom just, really, really got into her addiction like I had never seen. Like she was in bed, passed out, et cetera, et cetera. And then she ended up, I think it was my aunt who took her to an inpatient. And at this point I was about 15. And my dad was supposed to come and look after me. And he never came. So I was left to my own devices just being there. And I mean, there was some money left, so at least I could get food and what have you. But I was there, and our house became the party house because the kids at school found out that I had no parents home. And so by default, they would come over whether or not I would want them to. And the cops were getting really irritated and because they kept getting called. And so there was one night that they cordoned off our cul-de-sac, and they were coming to get me. And I'm sure they were going to take me to foster care, however that works. And my neighbors next door, they were a young couple.
Wait, how old were you at that point?
About 15.
Okay.
Might have been 14, 15, around there. My neighbors were a younger couple, and they saw everything that was going on. And I had told them that I was home alone. And so they jumped over the fence, their backyard fence, we had an orange grove. And then they jumped into my backyard. They came in my back door, grabbed me, and hid me in their house for a week until the police went away. And so that was fun.
Wow.
That was traumatic. Because I didn't want to get in trouble. I just couldn't keep the people away.
Now, were you at that age when everyone's over you? Were you guys all drinking?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And between age, when you were introduced to alcohol at the age of 7, how about between 7 and 14? Was there drinking going on during that whole time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, once I became a little bit older, then we would just, get people to buy it for us. Back in the day, you'd stand outside a liquor store and be like, hey, I'll give you an extra $5,
Right.
And so, yeah, I definitely dove into drinking. It's how it's what I knew, because that's
Right.
how my parents were.
Exactly.
You tend to mimic, or have
You
characteristics.
model your parents.
Yeah. Plus, I liked how I felt, and it made me forget.
Sure.
And so there was so many things that happened at that house that just contributed to my trauma that I have. And I have a lot of unresolved childhood trauma, which I'm just now starting to work on. I don't want to look at it, but I know I have to in order to continue to heal. Because of everything, I ended up becoming very depressed, full of anxiety. I mean, just anxiety every which way from Sunday.
When did that start really happening?
Probably when I was I always had anxiety. I think I
Right.
was born with it,
Yeah.
if that's a thing.
Oh, it is.
But yeah, I remember even at the age of 10, I had at the piano recital, I thought I was going to pass out cold, but even the anticipation of having to do it, and just the anxiety I felt always because of the turmoil and the fighting and the drinking and the passing out and all those things. My mom used to pass out on the couch every night, and I would sit with her because I didn't understand, and I'd want to take her upstairs. She needed to go to bed. We sleep in our beds, not the couch. So, but I was never successful. Again, I'm God bless my parents, but there was some love, but there was a whole lot of other stuff that went along with it. So, fast forward, my mom sold that house. She came out of recovery. We moved to Dana Point, and her drinking continued. She relapsed and then was drinking on the job. She had also gotten a DUI back when we were at the other house, but things were different then. So she didn't do jail time or anything.
Right.
So we get to Dana Point, and unfortunately, she moved my grandmother in to help pay, and that was challenging.
With two of them fighting a lot? Or?
Yeah. My grandma just didn't understand the disease and would get angry. And so after a while, my mom decided, because she lost her job because she was drinking on the job, she decided to sell that house. She met this man in rehab, and she basically told me that I could move in with them, stranger man, no thank you, or I could go out on my own. And it was at that point I decided to just pack up my stuff, and I went to work. I was just 16 when this happened. So I had a car. And so I ended up getting an apartment. Things, of course, were different back then. Right. So I got an apartment with a friend and started working 3 jobs and finished high school. I had a lot of pride in myself. So I ended up with a 4.2 GPA when I graduated. I was pretty proud of myself. But so got the apartment, and of course, Party City. It was just party. But when you're young, I guess you're resilient. I went to work with hangovers and stuff.
Right.
But I had to pay the bills. So I just worked, and I've been working ever since. But I ended up getting married when I was only 23. And that was there were a lot of red flags prior to me marrying him. But I married him, and that, there was good times, but there was a lot of really bad times because he got into some drugs, and he would lie to me and leave work and go party, and it was just, it's. I think I married the characteristics of my father, and so it gave me a lot of anxiety there. But I just, all I knew is I have to work, because I got to pay the bills, so I have to work. So we ended up having children together, 2 beautiful kids, which I do not regret whatsoever, having that relationship with him because it produced my beautiful kids. But he, at getting towards the end, I didn't, have the same kind of time for him when I've got 2 babies because my kids were 1 year apart. So then he would have issue with me because I was spending time with the kids. Well, of course I am.
Right. Your mom.
And so that became ugly, and after he was very, very verbally abusive to me, and at one time he touched me, and I'm like, oh, we're done. So so we split. So I was a single mom of my kids since they're 1 and 2. They're 24 and 25 now.
So you guys divorced within a couple of years after you started?
We were married for 10.
Oh, 10 years?
Yeah, we didn't have kids until we were 30.
Oh, I see.
Until I was 30.
Oh, okay.
So and when I was 33 is when the divorce was final. So so then again I have to work because I didn't get any support from him. So I just went to work and took care of those kids, and I was doing everything I could to make sure they did not have a childhood like mine.
Was their father involved with them in their life?
At the beginning I had the majority of the custody because they were babies.
Yeah.
Just they're babies. So and then we got to a point when they were like 6 and 7 that I went 50-50 custody. Because I knew that they needed a father. I grew up without it, and it messed me up. So I really tried to make sure that relationship was fostered, especially, for both of them, but my daughter needs a dad, so does my son. But and so I never spoke poorly about him. To this day, they don't know exactly what happened. It's none of the, they don't need to know. It's not.
Are they still in touch with him and contact?
Oh,
with
yeah.
Him? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. He's an alcoholic too. So,
Yeah.
So I just worked and worked and worked, and of course partied at night. But was able to take care of the kids. I was like a functioning alcoholic. And so I was relieved to be single because I didn't have that extra weight. I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to wonder what he was doing or where he's at or, is he spending money we don't have, whatever the case may be. So, and then we had, I went into financial services, and that was going really well. We had fun. We did some traveling. And then the recession hit in 2008. And I ended up losing my business, losing my house. And that's when I know that drinking became a real problem for me. I started doing day drinking because I couldn't like deal with the fact that I'm losing my home, and that I'm gonna have to file bankruptcy. I mean, who does that? Is what my mentality at the time. And so I ended up moving back. I moved in with my aunt and uncle. Thank God they gave us a room so that we'd have, roof over our head, and I could get back on my feet. So I'm very grateful to them. But I would drink at their soccer games. I would drink when we went out after the soccer game. So I know at that point it became a problem to where I couldn't stop. Like I couldn't stop for even 12 hours because I had become physically addicted to it. And so I was careful in terms of driving, but I was blessed. I mean, I shouldn't have been doing what I was doing, but I did it. So I ended up getting my own place after about 2 years, and my drinking was just out of control. I could barely hold a job. In fact, I had just gotten a new job, and I was teetering on losing it. So I ended up going to a detox in Laguna, and that was the first time that I went into treatment.
How old were you then?
Probably 40.
Okay.
Yeah, roughly. And so, yeah. maybe a little bit younger. So I did that, and then I was good for 6 years. But I wasn't running a program. I was just being sober. So obviously that set me up for not being able to maintain when things got ugly again. So that 6 years was really good. I was very successful in my career. My relationship with my kids was awesome. I had stopped communicating with my mom. At this point, she passed. She passed away when I was 23 due to alcoholism. She had cirrhosis of the liver, so she went into liver failure. And so I didn't have her. And there were so many things. I mean, I had to tell her not to come to baby showers and things like that because she had been drinking. That just messes with your psyche. So I have the place, but I'm really struggling. Went to detox. 6 years I had behind me, and then COVID hit. And my financial situation turned upside down on its head because I got paid commissions based on people working while everybody shut down. And so I was just living off my base, which was not enough to even keep the roof over our head. And so my kids were in college. I still had to pay full tuition, even though it was COVID and they never stepped foot on the campuses.
Right.
So I relapsed at that point, and I relapsed hard to where I was at home, drinking at home, isolating in my room, just not wanting to be there, not wanting to be on this planet, not wanting, because here I am again, in a financial woes, and it was just too much. It was too overwhelming because I didn't know what to do, and I didn't have the faith in my God that I do today. So I was just trying to handle it all internally. And I don't ask for help because I've never had anybody to ask to help me. It wasn't an option. And so I've had a real struggle with that. But so since 2020 to 2023, I was off and on sober, relapsing, over and over and over. And then I finally went into Laguna Treatment Center. I did inpatient for the first time. I was there for 45 days. And it was extremely beneficial. I just made one mistake, and I met a man in there. And so we started dating, which I shouldn't have done because I needed to focus on me. And so I was sober for a year and a half. He and I had plans to have my kids move out because they're, 23 and 22 or something like that. They're ready to move on together.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to move in. So they were going to move out. He was going to move in, and we would just continue our life. Well, he decided that he wasn't going to move in. And so that was about 3 weeks before my lease was up. And so I lost my apartment and essentially became homeless because, and I was devastated. So during that time when I was supposed to be packing, I was just in bed. I would drink and just pass out, drink and pass out because I couldn't handle it. I hadn't dated in a super long time because my job was to raise my children. And so I didn't want to have anything taken away from that. So anyway, it broke my heart into a jillion pieces, and I was not well enough to handle that situation. So finally, at least I got myself together. I got most of the stuff out of the house. I did leave some stuff there because I just couldn't function. So I ended up going back with my aunt because my uncle was super sick. And so I now it's just me and my dogs. So I moved back in there and I helped her care for him while he was slowly getting sicker and sicker. And we were able to keep him at home though, so that was a blessing.
And you're working now, and you have your things are okay now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us about, because when you saw me, I think you've been on Cymbalta for a few years. So tell me about when you first went on that, and what's your experience with that? If you remember back at the beginning when you.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I was at Laguna Treatment Center, and they put me. It's the first time I ever met with a psychiatrist. They had it in house, And they put me on the Cymbalta, and it was like somebody turned on a light switch. Like all of a sudden, I had calm. Mm-hmm. I didn't know I was depressed until I went on Cymbalta. I had no idea. And so, that was like a turning point in terms of being able to manage my depression. And they had also put me on gabapentin. And then they put me on hydroxyzine for anxiety because I've got some liver damage now that they don't want to put me on anything that's too difficult for my liver to process. So those have been working.
You were on Boost Bar, I think, too.
Yeah, on Boost Bar, and then a compensate.
Right. And how long? Which is Camprol, yeah. How long have you been sober now?
Well, right now I'm on 16 days.
Okay.
So I had a slight relapse a couple weeks ago, but it was a very short one, and I am dealing with what triggered that, and how can I catch it the next time. I'm working with a sponsor now, and I have my therapist.
So you working the program then?
I am. Yes, I'm finally working the program.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think it's necessary.
Yeah, it's very helpful for a lot of people. But people are like, I can do it on my own. I don't need that, and I don't want to keep talking about and bringing up old stuff. But sometimes just having a support system, people who understand what you've been through because they've been through a lot of similar stuff.
Right.
And, it's just having that community, can be super helpul.
People speak my language there. They understand.
Right, exactly.
They understand the disease.
Exactly.
My kids, my family, they're just like, well, just stop.
I know.
It's not like that.
It's not like that.
Believe me, if I could, I would. Do you think I would like this torture? No.
Well, it's your genetics.
Yes.
And your mom and your dad, especially your mom for sure, had her own, her own issues. I mean, people self-medicate for a reason. So why do people drink so much or do drugs? Because they're self-medicating. What are they self-medicating? Anxiety often, depression, bipolar disorder. People seek, when they're not feeling right, their mood's not right, they're seeking something. And alcohol works.
Right.
Temporarily.
Numbs you out, that's for sure.
It works. That's why people do it, and that's why it can become such a problem, because it's successful.
Right.
The problem is obviously the downside, liver problem, like your mom dying of cirrhosis, and that's the problem with long-term drinking. But like in your case, stopping now, your liver can kind of start to heal again.
Right.
You're not at the irreversible point like your mom was at, where it just became too late. You drink, when you do too much for so many years, it just becomes too late at one point.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an ugly death.
Yeah. It's not,
ugly.
Not good.
Ugly.
Exactly.
But yeah, I'm working with my doctors now. I have I don't know the term, but my liver doctor. He says things are looking,
Looking okay.
Yeah, looking good.
Yeah.
So
he'll keep an eye on your liver numbers and just kind of making sure that they kind of start to come down a little bit, and which they will. The body can heal.
Yeah, I have a good baseline right now. So
yeah, good.
Yeah, because I had been sober 5 months and then 90 days, and then.
So when you recently saw me, you were still having some anxiety. I think the Cymbalta was helping the depression and probably the anxiety somewhat, but not completely. Which is when I started you on Rexulti. So tell us your experience so far on the Rexulti.
So on the Rexulti, I started like you had told me, kind of ramp up to where I'm at now. And after about 3 days, I started to feel like relief.
Right.
I couldn't pinpoint it. But then I'm like, it's the Rexulti. It has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I started to just feel peace. That anxious feeling, the butterflies that sit up here in your throat, it actually hasn't come around for like 3 days. I haven't felt that. And I'm looking for jobs right now. I'm getting, rejection. I mean, everything where I should be, like normal me would be all, stressed out and full of anxiety, but I don't have that right now. And I know it has to be because of that. I feel very different. I feel very happy, and I feel at peace.
What it does, it doesn't take all stress away, but what it does is you have the ability to handle stress better.
Yes.
The same stress, needing a job, it's hard to find one right now. A lot of people throw a lot of applications out there. They're probably getting AI, rejected by AI without even seeing a human eye.
Right.
So that's why it's a tough time right now for a lot of people. But even going through it, the Rexulti basically, which is a mood stabilizer, and I added a lot to things like Cymbalta. Now Cymbalta is also, an SNRI, so it's in the same category as Pristiq and Effexor, or two other medications I prescribe a lot of. But yeah, it's a good medication, as you know, because you've been on it. And but the Rexulti I added in because I could just tell that there's a missing piece. The fact that which is fine being on hydroxyzine and Buspar and all that. That's great. The acamprosate, which is Camprol, which reduces cravings for alcohol. But the Rexulti is the piece to add in that really can make a huge difference. I prescribe a lot of it. I'm a huge fan. I'm not doing commercials for them, and they're not paying me to say that.
I'm a huge fan too now.
Yeah. But I think things are very hopeful now for you.
I don't feel hopeless. I feel hopeful.
Right. Now you work in a good program. You have a sponsor. And you got to just get to that point in life when it's just like, I just can't drink. Some people can. Some people can do it socially. A lot of people can do it socially. And stop, but a lot of times it just gets over, it crosses that line, and especially with your family history.
Yes.
And especially the fact that you were introduced to alcohol at 7 years old. I mean, that's, I had an uncle, my dad, my mom's parents grew up she grew up in Nebraska. They were farmers, and my mom's brother, my uncle, he told my dad this, when years later, but he said, I used to see my dad going into the barn, and and he would go in there, and I was wondering, why is he in there, and I would see like he was going to this one area of the barn, and so I would go in there and try to find it, and I found booze, I found like a stash of booze, like he was trying to hide it. But I found it, and he was a young kid, too, like you. And he said, I drank it, and he said I really liked it. And my dad told me, he said, I'd never forget when his name was Wendell. He said, I never forget when Wendell told me that will never get out of my mind when he said that to me, that I really liked it. And he died of alcoholism.
I'm sorry.
He died of esophageal varices, which is a horrible way to die. But what happens is, because of the liver, the pressure backs up, and you start getting blood vessels building up around the esophagus. And what can happen is if they burst, you're dead. So what happened with him is they burst. He started throwing up blood. My mom was, she found him. And there was blood all over the place, and he was laying there dead, and that really messed my mom up. When she saw that with her brothers, that just, my mom always had, she's not alive anymore, but she had a difficult time, with her family,
Right.
Because of her dad had an issue with alcohol, and her brother, and so my mom became like a teetotaler, where she just didn't drink ever. She's never drank. Maybe a little here and there, but she was so afraid of drinking after her family's experience and seeing that stuff.
Right.
So but yeah, I'm glad you're doing great now. You're much better, and
so much
you're
better.
gonna moving forward. Because you have a great attitude. You can see the bigger picture here. You can see, because part of the journey is relapsing often with alcoholism. It's a lifelong disease, but you have but thankfully it looks like you're at the point now where you've had enough relapses that you got figuring out, like, I just can't keep doing it.
Yes. Yes.
And so, but yeah, I think now you have a whole new hope, which is great.
For sure.
Yeah. And
After I met you, I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
It's the missing link.
Well, it was just one visit. I mean, the results were, because I could just tell, it's not, I could tell with you, it's not going to be complicated. It's going to be a simple thing. I add this Cymbalta, and sure enough, I think that simple addition is what's going to do it.
Yeah.
And the acamprosate, you're not going to be on that long term. Eventually, you'll be off of that, and you probably won't need the hydroxyzine much, and you won't need the Buspar, and so basically it'll cut your medication down to probably just 2.
That's awesome. Because I've been taking.
And occasionally a little bit of a third, maybe, but yeah, this is very hopeful. So.
Yes, thank you so much.
Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
No, I'm just, like I said, I'm very hopeful, and
Good.
I see my future now as bright, where it was dim,
Yeah.
very dim for a long time. And so I'm actually happy again. I found my happy. So,
Yeah, because one of the worst signs with depression and anxiety is hopelessness. When you don't see hope, when people say, "I just don't see that things are going to get better," and that's where suicidal thoughts start happening. When people are like, "What's the point? If I don't have any hope that I'll ever feel better, I just can't stop." And that's a bad place to be at when
and I was
when
there
you don't have
once.
hope.
Yeah.
And now that you have hope and you can see that things can be better and that they will be better the rest of your life too.
Yes.
By the way, this is not going to be a short-term thing. The rest of your life is going to be better. And so because you have a great attitude and you got people around you who care about you
And support me.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. So in Melissa's case, again, I've only seen her one visit, but I had her come in because she has such a story, her background, starting the drinking at such a young age and becoming an alcoholic, bad family history, bad upbringing, just horrible trauma, all the rest. Anyway, but she got introduced in rehab by a psychiatrist to Cymbalta. So I prescribed Cymbalta. It's in the same family as the Prestige and the Effexor XR. It's the SNRI class, but Cymbalta is a good medication. I prefer the other ones, but nothing wrong with Cymbalta. It's a good medication. So again, it's a serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. So again, it's working on those two chemicals. Boom. And she's been on that now, a few years now, and doing really well. But when I saw her, she was still having like anxiety. They're giving her Boost Bar, and Boost Bar, is a lot of people are on it. It's an okay. It's not a great medication in my opinion. I just never seen great results with it. She's on hydroxyzine, which is okay. I mean, it does help with anxiety. It's an antihistamine actually. But I knew that she had enough anxiety that it really warranted that I add something to Cymbalta. So I added Rexulti. Again, I talk about Rexulti a lot because it's an amazing medication. So it's basically a dopamine antagonist. It's in the antipsychotic class, but you got to remember, like when I use Seroquel or whatever it is, when I give these things, majority of people I give them to are not psychotic. They're not schizophrenic. They're basically, they probably have a variation of bipolar disorder, but it's very subtle because, a lot of them don't have mania. That's easier to detect. They don't have hypomania. They have like lingering anxiety, lingering depression. So when I see that, I know that there's something more going on. So and if you look at Rexulti, the way they market on TV, on commercials, even to doctors, they say it's for treatment-resistant depression. So you add it to an antidepressant like Cymbalta, and that gets people there. But really it is for that. But I think it's all, I call it the bipolar spectrum. So a lot of people are on the bipolar spectrum. How do I know that? When an antidepressant or a combination doesn't get people completely to where I want to get them, which is remission. And so when I see that, I know there's another element involved. And so in her case, I've started like a week or so ago, and she's already feeling amazingly better. So being a dopamine antagonist, it's basically, so these are going the right way, but the problem is in her case, dopamine is going too fast. And it's going too fast, and that's going to create anxiety. And so basically being a dopamine antagonist, it attaches, it slows it down, and it try to normalize it for the flow. So we can't stop it entirely, but we need to slow it down and kind of create a filter so that now dopamine is going more appropriately. And I've already adjusted the dose pretty much quickly with her. She's at 2 milligram, which is a very common dose. But my argument with the company is like, well, if you have to add an atypical antipsychotic to a antidepressant, how is that depression? And they don't have an answer to it because they can't really market it any other way because that's the way that they're supposed to market things, and the FDA will not allow any other discussion about anything else. So, but that's the reality of it. The reality of it is that it's, you know, a spectrum. But there's a lot of people on the spectrum that are never diagnosed because most doctors don't have the wherewithal or they don't have the knowledge to be able to really see that, and they don't do it because they just don't know, and especially with primary care doctors for sure. But anyway, it's just a simple thing, and I anticipate with her she's going to be good to go. Might have to do something else. I'm not sure yet because it's only been one visit, but within one visit she had just a great result.